Okay. This is Tanya Pearson interviewing Kristen Hersh for the Women of Rock Music Oral History Project at the Sophia Smith Collection at Smith College. Thank you, Kristen.
Sure.
I'm happy that it finally worked out. And with no days to spare, because when you said you were leaving tomorrow, it's like, this is it.
Yeah, this is it.
But thanks very much. I appreciate it. And I just told you off camera that it's sort of like this is your life.
Yeah, now I'm scared. I didn't know that. I don't like my life.
Yeah, a little bit. Well, just what you think is most important. I was wondering if you could start off by talking a little bit about your childhood, when and where you were born.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like you had very, creative parents, and just kind of your childhood and how that led up to you picking up a guitar, playing music.
Wow.
Yeah.
I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, to Southern Baptist Buddhists, hippies,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually we moved to a communal house with a bunch of other hippies, and that was it's a really healthy way to start. Naked.
Yeah.
Just stay naked as long as you can, and homegrown vegetables and brewer's yeast and lots of music, and a parachute on the ceiling that was supposed to say "Be Together" on it, but the guy who spray painted "Be Together" on it upside down on a ladder was really high, so it said "Be a Tog Eater" on it.
Be a Tog Eater?
Yeah, and no one had another parachute, so we lived under that.
Yeah.
My father, who was raised on Appalachian folk songs, would play Appalachian folk songs for me on his guitar,
Mm-hmm.
and play, the Beatles and Patti Smith, and, I guess probably Neil Young and Bob Dylan. I don't really remember,
Yeah.
but he played records when I was very young, and eventually I was so enamored of the guitar, mostly because he told me not to touch it. It was a really nice guitar. It's really beautiful Yamaha.
Yeah.
And I was, not allowed to mess with it. So of course I wanted to. And when I was 9 years old, he started teaching me to play because I want to quit messing with it. And if you play, I don't mean to be snotty, but if the music listened to is Bob Dylan and Neil Young, you don't know that many chords.
Yeah. Oh, that's snotty.
And that was okay, but every chord sounded like a color to me. And I was really tired of primary colors. I didn't understand why we couldn't venture into magenta and aquamarine and sage.
Mm-hmm.
And when I said that, he just looked at me like I was bonkers, because he'd never heard of synesthesia, and neither had I. I just heard music as colors.
Yeah.
And I got so sick of E major and G that he just finally shoved the guitar I wasn't allowed to touch into my hands and said, "Play colors." And that was what I did. I started making up my own chords because I got tired of all the regular colors, and it became such a passion that I took up classical guitar for a few years, and what that did was teach me rules, and it probably kept my fingers dexterous, but rules were concrete shoes. You're not swimming anymore. You're being pulled down. And I began to lose my colors. It all turned black and white.
Mm.
And the sheet music just looked like ants. It literally looks like ants.
Yeah.
And I loved classical guitar music, but it wasn't what I would have played had I been born on a desert island with a guitar next to me and never heard anything else. I lost my language, in other words, and it took a car accident to bring it back. I was hit by a car, sustained a double concussion, and this foot came off. It was broken in half right here. So when it was under my leg, and so when I lifted my leg up, it was just a bone, no foot, and there's blood everywhere. But all I could think was, with only one foot, I can't be in a band, which doesn't make any sense.
No.
Like, you'd be like the coolest person in the band if you only had one foot. But I found my foot.
Peg leg band leader.
It would be so rad.
Yeah.
We would have sold records. So I found my foot and stuck it back on, and I was in the hospital for a long time. And while I was there, I started hearing what I thought were machines. There's like whirring and like sort of static, undulating wind noise and high-pitched tones and rumbling, and it went on 24 hours a day, but it gradually changed until it became a vocabulary with which I was familiar, and almost musical one. And then it became music, and one of the instruments that was playing was percussive melody that eventually came to be syllables, and those were lyrics. And that was my language. It was in color. The colors came back. And that's what Throwing Muses played.
When you got in the accident, or a car hit you when you were riding your bike, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Were you already playing in Throwing Muses, or was Throwing Muses after the accident?
I started the band when I was 14, and we just played what anybody else would have played. We wrote songs, but they were not alive, and it was fun, but it was not a passion, because I had sort of lost my passion when I learned the rules.
Yeah.
I think I was hit by a car when I was 16 or 17, and what came back was very passionate, but it was also very obsessive and terrifying. No one wants to hear music that no one else hears. And it was not continuous. When a song needed to happen, it would grow in volume. And when I learned it, which was really just listening, it would fade, and then I wouldn't be haunted by it anymore. But I had to serve the songs, and I'm not real kooky or groovy or anything that would have accepted that.
Yeah.
I was a biology major. I wanted everything to make sense, and this didn't. And so I guess you'd call that a love-hate relationship or a love-terror relationship, music, which lasted for many, many years.
Okay. I'm trying to think, because so you're in the bike accident. Throwing Muses was a Newport, Providence-based band, and I'm wondering, I know Tanya Donnelly, who's in Throwing Muses, is your stepsister?
Was, yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I don't
still
know.
Sisters, yeah.
I guess it's like for life, but
yeah.
When your parents married and you became stepsisters, how was it playing in a band with? I mean, and you guys were so young too. It's like when I think about it, I have to remember that I'm thinking about like 16-year-old girls playing in a band. But yeah, just what was it like playing in a band with your family member, and then it was kind of like a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
Or drummer, bass player.
Well, we live on an island. Aquidneck Island in Rhode Island is a place It is very grim and also very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And there's not a lot to do. So you either surf or play in a band, and none of us could surf. So that's kind of why we had a band.
Yeah.
And I taught my stepsister to play guitar, and our drummer Dave had been my best friend since I was 8 years old.
Oh, okay.
He's still my drummer today. He just left the studio.
Is he the one? Oh, okay. Yeah. Same Dave. All right.
And what it was a way to get invited to parties we wouldn't have been invited to.
Oh, okay.
But then after my accident, it got really kind of nutty, and we were still playing parties. We still thought, we should just, we're a band, we just play exciting songs now.
Mm-hmm. And
no one seemed to notice, no one thought we were weird. We did play parties, and we had lots of friend fans, and we made demos, and they would play them in their cars, and it was just sort of a little community. And we played on hardcore bills in clubs.
Yeah, I read that.
Like young kids, and
yep.
There are like 14 bands on one bill, and I just loved hardcore because it sounded like those machines that sound like the wind in the ocean. Yeah. And we didn't really fit on the bills, but we had to store a guitar, so it wasn't that weird.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't until, like, I guess we were in high school, and we would drive to sound check wherever it was, somewhere in New England or in New York, and you sound check if they let you, and you play whenever they tell you to play, even if it's 7 o'clock. Mm-hmm. And nobody's there, even if it's 2 o'clock and nobody's there. And then you load out at 3 and you drive home and you get up for high school, And
yeah.
We were lucky to have the shows. But it wasn't until we started playing actual shows, opening for real bands or headlining, that people started saying we were from another planet. And that really stuck. They still say we're from another planet. Mm-hmm. Which I find baffling, because we could be so much weirder.
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, but I mean, it was different, like you said, playing hardcore shows, and I just think, like, retrospectively, thinking about bands like Throwing Muses, or I just told you over dinner about Lydia Lunch, we were talking about the no wave movement, and she's like, at the time, it wasn't a movement, it wasn't this big thing, it was like 20 people in a basement. So I'm wondering what your reception was like as being like this teenage female fronted band, and how eventually did you get, or like when did 4AD sign you, and when did you start opening for bigger bands and kind of venturing out of Newport? Well,
the Providence scene was excellent. It's where Talking Heads mm-hmm. came from, and there's RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, so there's a ready-made audience that we called the Sea of Glasses.
Yeah.
They were practically taking notes while we played, so we were allowed to be as arty as we wanted to be, and in fact the stage show itself sort of matched our sound. We had carpets and lamps and TVs tuned to static, and films being projected on us, and we didn't know it was arty. We just kind of wanted to hide. Mm-hmm. But we were also over enthusiastic, so that allows you to some follow through when that's your set, which is just actually a set. So we didn't really notice we weren't supposed to sound like ourselves until we were talked into moving to Boston and becoming part of the Boston scene, which was an actual scene where people got signed and all that.
Yeah.
But it was still this bonfire of everybody being allowed to sound like themselves, and you're trying to make a bigger bonfire than the crap. Mm-hmm. And so you all work together. You're on the same team, and I don't even remember headliners. I remember the bands becoming the audience when they stepped off stage for the other bands, and we were all just supporting each other in speaking our languages. Mm-hmm. That said, we did seem to have the strangest language.
Yeah.
And so I certainly had no faith in our longevity. I figured we'd die as soon as our equipment died, and it was really cheap, so it was going to be soon.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen. We got great reviews. So, because, you know, the frustrated journalists, like they're just bored, and we didn't bore them.
Yeah.
And I suppose we were women, but that hadn't occurred to us. It was really that there's this indie scene, and then suddenly we were called alternative, and we had never heard that term before, and I'm not sure it was ever even used before.
Yeah.
They were calling us an alternative to what? Like, we were offended.
Alternative to Talking Heads or something.
It was alternative. Well, they would have been called alternative,
Yeah.
so we didn't get it. We're like, alternative to real music? Like, what do you mean? We were insulted. Anyway. That they started saying that that I was crazy and that this was an alternative to anything else, and that was our hype, which we took to be sort of negative. We didn't really get it, but it was still hype. So we were packing clubs, and then eventually headlining, and then eventually we recorded by almost every major. And we just kept sitting them down in their fancy restaurants where they took us and saying, "What are you thinking? No one's going to like this. Like, we don't even like it."
Yeah.
And all they were going on was hype. They thought people would like it because that's what it looked like. Which I still disagree with. I don't think anybody would like what we do. And the reason we didn't sign with a major is just for that. Like, we just thought they were wrong. And we knew that once they figured that out, they wouldn't work our records, and we'd be stuck in a 10-record deal. So we just made demos and sold them, and we just thought, we're not a part of your world. That would make no sense. And we just haven't figured that out yet. So we couldn't imagine, marketing people trying to sell what we did. And then I was in our apartment. We all lived in an apartment in Somerville, and I was sick. I figured I had the flu. I was just sitting around. Nobody else was there, and the phone rang, and I answered it, and there was a guy with what I took to be a fake English accent, pretending to have a record company. I figured it was just some fan who was waiting for one of the cute girls in the band to answer the phone, and I was there because I was sick, and so he just talked to me out of politeness, and he said, well, I don't sign American bands anyway, so it was nice talking to you. I'm thinking, what'd you call for? But I figured that was proof he didn't really have a record company.
Yeah.
And then I was still sick a couple of days later, and he called again, and I was like, oh man, the cute girls still aren't here, and poor guy's stuck with me. I'm just pukey, so I'm listening to him, and we started talking. We just talked about British words for skin eruptions, like boils, like like verrucas.
I was gonna say a wart. Yeah.
Yeah, they have all these different terms for it. Like, how many do you need? Like, it's something you don't even want to talk about. So we talked about it, and he had some really good stories. He had a boil on his neck, and he was sitting in a cafe, which he pronounced calf, which made me think, well, maybe he really is English, because that's just goofy.
Yeah.
And he said it burst and sprayed out to the mirror and splattered all over. And I thought, this guy's great. I don't care if he's a liar. I don't care if he's waiting for cute girls to answer the phone. But he didn't sign American Band, so we just hung up again. And then he called back a few days later, and we just became fast friends. And it turned out he was really English and actually calling from London. And he had a whole record company that was his. And I was just some little crappy rat girl who turned out not to have the flu, but to be pregnant. Teenage pregnancy, right on. And then at the last minute, he's like, okay, I'll sign an American band. I'll sign you guys. And it'll just be a one record deal. So it's fair all around. And you stay if you want to, and we keep you if we want to. And we were like, all right. And that dude put us in this high-end studio in Massachusetts. He sent a British producer over. This guy is really high-strung, Liverpudlian, who kept getting electric shocks. Everything he touched shocked him. Yeah. So all he did was scream. That's all we remember about him. He's just like jumping and yelling. And I was by then about 8 months pregnant, and we were almost finished recording when Deep Purple, the old fart band, decided that they wanted to be in the studio, and they had us kicked out. And they had us kicked out in such a way as to not experience any of us. Like we had to pack up. It was a live-in studio, so we had to pack our suitcases and rush out the back door so that Deep Purple didn't see us.
So they didn't have to be ashamed of themselves?
Oh, yeah, I hope so. I don't think that was why. I think they would have been ashamed of us peasants. But we never finished our first record because Deep Purple kicked us out.
Oh.
And I was 8 months pregnant, and when the producer flew to London, I couldn't go. My drummer, Dave, went and finished and mixed the record. And a couple of years ago, he brought a photograph of me sitting on a park bench from the back to my birthday party. That was my birthday present. I was like, what is this?
Oh, no.
Is it not working?
Oh, I think we're still good.
Oh.
Sorry. Always check the power strip.
Gosh, yeah.
Yeah. It was close, but everything's fine.
Wow.
So I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Your birthday present.
So my birthday present from Dave was a picture of me sitting on a park bench taken from behind. And I said, what is this? And he said, it was a picture I took when we were 19 of the last time you would ever like me. Like I'm welling up talking about it. I said, what do you mean? I've always loved you and I will always love you.
Yeah.
He said, when I took this picture, I thought you would hate me in the next 5 minutes because he was bringing me our record and he thought he had ruined it.
Oh.
Isn't that sad?
Yeah, that's really sad.
Yeah. And it was a little more precious than we were for sure. But he had fought hard to keep the raw quality and lost a lot of battles, about half of them. And probably it would not have been so successful if he had won all of them because people weren't so into raw, not as much as we were.
Yeah.
And it was a polished version of what we sounded like. And we kind of liked rattiness, we liked crappiness, and not everybody does.
Yeah.
We liked goofiness, and the goofy was all taken out. We had this sort of country punk aesthetic in about a third of our songs, and none of those were. Something like maybe the Violent Femmes might. We had started doing that when we were 14, and we stuck with it. And there's a culture for that in America, but not necessarily in England, where it's not their country music.
Okay. Was this? I just get a little screwy with the timeline. Was the 1988 tour with the Pixies, was that your first like big headlining tour, or had you?
Yeah, probably.
And was that around the time that this all happened with the record and recording in England?
I don't even know.
Yeah, well, as long as I'm close.
My first baby was born around the time the first record was born. And I don't think we toured until he was about 6 months old. So it may be that we toured on the back of our next EP and not our debut record.
Okay. I guess that's not even really that important. But just when I was like reading interviews and reading your books, it's just, you're like a real storyteller. And so I try to keep it like kind of chronological so that when people are watching it, they know like, wait, well, how old is she then? Or when did this happen?
Will begin here.
Yeah.
And here.
It's a constant problem with these. And then I'm like looking at my note, like, wait, how old is she now? Where is
meticulous, and I'm vague.
Okay, well, I guess around that time I did read, I think it was an interview in Rolling Stone, that you had a difficult time around that period with your, like, Warner Brothers was kind of courting you, and they, like, had a problem, like, you weren't pretty enough, fashionable enough, your songs weren't poppy enough, and so you were deemed difficult, which seems to have been something that has followed you throughout the years. And then it's funny because people that know you personally, or, I mean, I remember meeting you for the first time and you're just like a very nice, pleasant person. I just think that, I'm wondering how you feel about the way that, like, record companies viewed you or rock journalists portrayed you.
Yeah.
If it's kind of, I don't know if it's like a...
The good rock journalists would note the schism. Basically, their thrust was, look at this sweet girl or nice mom lady, and then watch what happens on stage. Mm-hmm. And that's true, and it's a better story. The Warner Brothers take on what I was ugly and too smart. So what that means is you are difficult to work with because you're not malleable and you're not marketable. Mm-hmm. They want someone dumb and hot. And that's not that different from a lot of popular culture. So I probably should have expected it, but music was my religion, and I couldn't imagine that someone would crap all over it like that. So if I knew what I was doing, and I did, that would mean they couldn't tell me what to do, and neither could their producers. Mm. And I would sit in their offices, and these were music fans, mostly, and I would look at their record collection and say, like, how can you know what music should be and do what you do? How can you sell crap? Mm. Because they wouldn't work to sell our records. They used us to sign young bands who were fans of ours, but they wouldn't lift a finger to help our careers. And they were their records. Like, you'd think they'd want to sell them, but they choose 3 or 4 to work, the ones that are gonna fly, meaning the dumb ones, and they don't do anything else, and they still get their paychecks. So they'd let me into their offices and to ask why they sold crap, and they'd say, because crap sells. It's like, that's because you sell crap. Yeah. Like, they hadn't looked into the untapped audience of intelligent music listeners. Musically literate people demand substance over style, and all they were doing was marketing style, throwing it away, marketing another style, throwing it away. It's just fashion sound. Yeah. And so we extricated ourselves. I bought us off of Warner Brothers by getting them my first solo record.
Oh, okay.
And as it turned out, none of the other members were signed. I was signed as a key member, so it was a fair trade. And my solo record cost about $5 to make. It was in the black the day it was released. And the day I left Warner Brothers, they declared it in the red so that I would never make another penny off of it. Oh. These are bad. If not people, business practices.
Yeah.
But the schism between me personally and my music personality ultimately turned out to literally be split personality. I have multiple personality or dissociative disorder, and my alter or other personality was music, and that's what I started hearing in the hospital. That's when she started talking and started making noise, and every trauma, every pain, every anger, every tear would go into the music, and that's why it was so harsh and so impactful, and I was so not. Mm-hmm. I am the nicest person you know, because everything dark is sound to me. And for 25, 30 years, people have been watching me do, engage in classic shifting, where I would get freezing cold and glaze over, stare unblinking into the distance, and disappear. And then I could play music. And I called it disappearing, and everyone thought I was speaking metaphorically. And I sort of did too. I just thought, well, art's a big deal. But it was a coping mechanism, a survival mechanism, and it meant that I had no memory of writing, playing, or recording any of my music. So, you sit down and do an interview, and someone asks what a song is about, or one of your loved ones says, what do you mean by this? Is this me you're talking about? I would have to say, I have no idea. And I'm not sure everyone believed that. I made people I love cry. I cry right now talking about it because it wasn't fair. And I didn't even know. I would never hurt anyone willingly. And I did with music, like it was a weapon. And I've since integrated, so that I had these two personalities that were like Kurt Cobain and Miss Sook, from Truman Capote. And now I'm both at the same time, which is cleaner. And I don't yet know if the music has suffered. I haven't had a chance to really play music I've written integrated. I may not have that ability anymore, but I can play, and when I play, I'm present. I can see it going by in weak moments. Like we were just, Throwing Muses just made our first record in 10 years, and it was released as a book, 32 songs on it. It's like epic, and it's supposed to be, what we can die after making. And so we were on the road, or at least I was on the road working it for about a year, and I was so amazed. I could see my fingers playing. I'd never seen that before.
Yeah.
I could remember a show. I could blink. I had no stage fright. I had horrible stage fright my whole life because I had no idea what happened out there. I would think, you got the wrong girl. I was doing deals with God. Like, don't make me go out there.
Yeah.
And it was gone. So at first I was flying, the first 6 months. And then I just started to get weaker and weaker. And by the end, I was just disappearing again because it's just hard work.
Yeah.
And I had been, my whole life I've been disappearing to play music, and I just let it happen again because it meant I could play well. I have since learned that it's not a clean break from that kind of coping mechanism, that it's can be your Achilles heel to disappear when you can't handle the stress of something. And it became something I couldn't handle, oddly, so it works. Disappearing works. But I don't know what's going to happen when I try to tour the record you just heard in the studio.
I never made it to the studio.
You didn't get there, that's right. No, you ate sushi.
That's why I was driving up and down that street a lot.
I'm sorry. I had a feeling that was going to happen.
Okay, I know you've had like a rough day, so I kind of don't want to bring it up, but I do want to bring it up because I don't know when I'll get to talk to you again.
No, it's okay.
Okay.
I'm used to my life.
Okay.
Getting used to it.
Well, just, and I'm trying to, like, keep with the records, because I know around the time you guys disbanded, was it the Real Ramona that was the last?
Oh. Well, it's weird.
It was, like, kind of around, but all that other stuff with Dylan and losing custody and just well, I read a quote that I think is like really accurate as far as being a mom and like being in a band or being a musician. And I think this, yeah, it says there's from 95. He said, I've been made to look really bad for just being a mother in a band, so much so that they took Dylan away. People have no idea what these kinds of mothers are right now. That it's just easy to make you look bad, a history of mental illness, a rock band, traveling. But you said, and then you go on to say, I'm actually a really good mother. We have a nuclear family, yet they will not forgive me for that one lousy thing, which is that I can't give up my band.
Yeah.
I thought that was probably like the most powerful quote that I've read from, yeah, I mean, a woman who's raising a family and just plays music.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think men may be judged too, but it's just such a foreign concept that a mother would do this. At least the men can leave their children with the mother, and I wanted to.
Yeah.
I didn't have the option, so I brought them all over the world. And if you're a National Geographic photographer, that's great. But if you're in a rock band, it sounds seedy to people. And there is no more wholesome place on this earth than my tour bus. It's full of brilliant, kind people and my beloved children. And they eat health food and they go to bed at a normal hour. And we read bedtime stories. And while they're sleeping, I play. And they have no idea. And I sleep 2 hours if I have to because I'm so blessed on both ends of my sleep cycle that I get to play music and then wake up to nurse a baby a couple hours later. I did a few times think I'll never sleep again, but it was so worth it. I mean, talk about having it all.
Yeah.
I wasn't a businesswoman. I lived my passion, and all of those 4 babies were my other passion.
Well, yeah, in that period, when you lost custody of your son, you married your husband Billy, who is also, I know he has been your manager or was for a long time. Okay. And you had 3 other children with him. So you had Dylan, and so you have 4 boys altogether.
Right.
I don't have all boys either.
They're not really boys.
No.
They're people.
Well, I guess I only know Dylan, yeah. And
would you call him a boy?
No.
They're just people. I mean, I'm not a girl, so there weren't really any genders in our house. And I think that means that there were no limitations. We actually did everything. Mm-hmm. We had the tea parties and the football games. And, they're all homeschooled because necessarily they're on the road. And it's funny, they wouldn't group people according to gender or age. Mm-hmm. And it certainly would never occur to them to even notice someone's race. Yeah. And a lot of their uncles are like big Hells Angels dudes. You know? It's almost as if they see through people because they've never had occasion for any surface reality to predict behavior. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. It would just not occur to them. They're sort of piercing in their gaze. And I think what they're doing is reading people because they are not well versed in the vocabulary of segregation of any kind. It's interesting what happens when you raise people that way. Yeah. And my son Wyatt says it means that they can't be fooled. Which is an interesting take on it. Like if you were spun by someone's trappings, then I suppose it's kind of like being fooled. Yeah. That's really smart. Yeah. All right, steal that. Get on to happier stuff, I swear to God. Oh, good. Would you
your diagnosis bipolar, and like when was that, or was that like freeing for you?
It was a misdiagnosis.
It was okay. See,
Yeah.
I'm not really sure.
I
figured I would
was
just ask you.
Well, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good question because I was like the poster child for bipolar disorder for 20 years. I didn't mean to tell anyone, but they took me out of the hospital to fly me to London and do a press tour, which no one thought I could do. So they put me in Ivo's house, the guy who did turn out to be English and have a record company.
Oh, okay.
And so I lived in his house, and the journalists would come there and interview me, and I wasn't allowed to say anything about where I had just been, on Suicide Watch, and not that I would have wanted to, but it was hard. I was not in a great place.
Yeah.
And I had just lost custody of my son, and I was having to answer questions about music, which are they are often either too intense or too shallow, and intense I couldn't handle, and shallow would just be so off base that it would make me angry.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm very, very nice. So for 2 weeks I was very, very nice, and then these two writers called the Stud Brothers, who are actually brothers and very, very good. They're amazing music people, amazing writers, and they were good friends. And they were the last interview, and I had just been like keeping it together until they got there and they sat down. And their first question was, "Are you okay?" Because they saw something in me that wasn't. Where I had hidden it from everyone. Photographers were right up in my face doing all these photo shoots, and nobody had brought it up or had seen it. And when they said that, I broke down, and I told them as friends what had happened, and they said, "We're your friends, and that's how you were speaking to us. The tape recorder was on, but we respect your privacy, and we won't put any of that in the story.
Mm-hmm.
But that means that we're going to have to do a shallow interview."
Oh, okay.
And I had already flown home, and Billy and I talked about it, and we said, we have to respect their professionalism and their profession, and honor the interview they actually did.
Yeah.
And I'll deal with the fallout.
Oh, wow.
I didn't know it would be 25 years of fallout, but
Yeah.
It was okay because they wrote a beautiful piece.
Mm-hmm.
And yet everyone read that piece and then wrote their own, and they weren't so informed. And as it turns out, I was never bipolar. The anxiety and depression associated with dissociative disorder mimic bipolar.
Oh, okay.
But I never felt bipolar. I didn't act like bipolar people. I didn't, I never acted manic. Like I said, I was always a nice lady.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people saying I couldn't get out of bed for weeks, and I would never do that.
Yeah.
I would think, well, maybe you didn't have to get out of bed? Like, well, I didn't know what they were talking about. But obviously, if part of you is hidden and then coming out sometimes and you can't remember what she did, that's gonna make you anxious and depressed. But, so I was put on all kinds of inappropriate medication, and that'll mess you up. But it was many, many years of Billy and me both trying to figure out what was wrong, and what was wrong seemed to be PTSD from losing my son,
Mm-hmm.
and music, and I knew that.
Yeah.
So I had like insomnia, stomach aches, like who doesn't? But the problem turned out to be much more serious than that. Like we had all just gotten used to it. I didn't realize how many people took care of me. My bandmates practically surrounded me at all times, keeping people away keeping me from seeing anything that was a trigger and would make me disappear, like hearing a child cry, could make me have a seizure, could make me vomit, could make me simply disappear and become her. And she didn't talk. You know, it must have been pretty freaky. I wasn't really there. The rest of the time I was just sweet as pie. That's all I knew how to be. So it wasn't until about a year ago that a therapist who was treating me for the PTSD that Billy had actually diagnosed, she kept saying, "You're dissociating, you're dissociating." She just kept saying that over and over again, and I didn't know what it meant. Yeah. And I was kind of like, ixnay on the AZ cray, you know, I've had enough of that. And then I thought to look it up. I was like, you mean like
Did you Google it?
What?
Did you Google it?
Probably. And then I found out what it was. It's like, are you saying I have multiple personality disorder? And she's like, yes, but we don't call it that anymore. Yeah. So I went through EMDR therapy, which is like a light bar, and you hold electrodes and you relive traumatic memories until they're placed back in time. Like I always felt that I was lost in time. Literally, the time that I lost my son was always right now. And people would say, look at him, you know he's alive now. You know he was taken away and you didn't know if he was alive and you didn't know if you'd ever see him again. But that happened then. He's a 25-year-old man and he's beautiful and he's fine and he's right there. And I'd say, I know what you mean, but that's linear time and this is real time. And I still remember feeling that way. I have to go to the lawyers this week. You know, the baby is gone. They took the baby away. I can't find him. I'm looking all over the island. And if I find him, I'm not allowed to go near him because the restraining order. And something that is the worst thing that can happen. Like, you can't even kill yourself if your child is alive. Yeah. It just freezes you there. I was stuck in time, and it, for some reason, reliving all of that crap and watching lights move and holding electrodes reprogrammed my concept of where I was in time so that it was back there and I could begin to heal from it. I wasn't in constant shock. Yeah. I don't know what question I was answering there. Sorry.
I actually don't remember.
I bet.
Which is fine. Okay. I think it was the motherhood question. No. And it's totally fine, trust me. I try really hard, but I never expect things. I have no expectations.
Okay. Well, it's odd how
yeah, I mean things just
like, it's not in a row.
No, it never is. So I try for the sake of the
That's
project,
very
but it's
sweet of
fine. And it's more interesting this way, so it's fine.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about we'll move on to like happier things. But I just feel like that whole time, you know, I was reading, it seemed like there were just a few years that were really rough, and it's like I didn't want to just skip over them. But I did have like and this is kind of an easy question. So when Throwing Muses with the Tanya Donnelly version disbanded, did you intend, like, then you did solo records, like I have your whole discography here, but I don't want to list all of your albums, so maybe if you could just talk a little bit about what that was like, why you broke up. Was it because you wanted to do solo work? Was it because you just weren't getting along, like internal stuff?
I get along with everyone. So the band ended up splitting because I couldn't bear the evil. I couldn't bear my own evil, the songs, and I couldn't bear Warner Brothers' evil, and I was in love, I was marrying Billy, and it was all beautiful and clean, and we were living near the ocean. We were dirt poor, just the opposite of those evil rich people.
Yeah.
And it was wrong. It was all wrong. And my sister Tanya could deal. She didn't have evil songs. She just had regular songs. And she was fine to let Warner Brothers do their thing. And, we were all not shattered, but a little shattered, And Warner Brothers kind of broke us up. They gave us this really nasty producer, and I left my island halfway through a root canal. I couldn't afford to finish, and flew out to LA to make The Real Ramona in just constant pain. So I was taking like fistfuls of painkillers, and we couldn't afford to eat, so we buy this cheap champagne that was eventually our wedding champagne. Still drank it all the time. And we were living in an apartment building with the Pixies, and sitting in the hot tub, drinking champagne. I mean, we didn't have a dime.
Yeah.
And we had this weird life where we were living with these high-class hookers and the cast of Ghost Dad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and all these wannabe metal bands that thought they were the next big thing, but they weren't yet. So, and then the Pixies, and that's where Billy and I were engaged. So it was this odd, happy time through a fuzz of painkillers and champagne high and evil. And I would I'd be starting a take, like a vocal take, and be getting ready, because I'm getting ready to disappear, is what I usually did. I didn't know I was doing that. I thought I was focusing.
Yeah.
Trying to remember the words or whatever. But I was on so many painkillers that I'd just be getting ready, and I'd hear the producer say, "Okay, that's fine. Let's put down a double." I was like, a double of what? He's like, of the vocal you just did.
Yeah.
It's like, I just did a vocal? He's like, okay, let's try that again.
Yeah.
It's like, that's what that time was like. And that's when my band broke up. So it was just sort of like, it was the right thing to do. I just didn't belong there.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy and I flew home to our clean island, and we had a clean wedding, and we had a beautiful baby, and he was working as a bartender, and the songs were piling up on my 4-track, because songs don't care about the music business. And Dave, my drummer, my best friend since I was 8, would come over to play with the baby, and he'd put my headphones on, and just start playing the stuff I was putting down on the 4-track.
Yeah.
And I remember the afternoon, my baby on his lap, that he took the headphones off and said, "Why don't we just be a band that doesn't give a shit?" Because we were always a band that didn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Let's just play. And that made sense. And I was technically still on Warner Brothers.
Oh, because of the solo.
I didn't leave Warner Brothers.
Yeah.
And so we made Red Heaven as a trio with our original bass player, Leslie Langston.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just what we felt like doing. And it's sort of, nobody really ever asked me to bimbo again. They sort of got it. It's like, oh, she's the one that likes to make noise, and she looks like a normal person. And they just sort of forgave me. And oddly, Leslie only did the record. We hired our bass player, who is still in the band, who's been in the band for now 20-something years. Bernard George. He did the tour, and he's done every record since.
Mm-hmm.
The next record we made was our biggest record ever. It just didn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
We didn't care, but what we did care about was the music, and that came across. And alternative music was then big.
Oh yeah, right.
So we were on the
90s,
radio.
Yeah.
And they let us make our own video. I had one of my friends from RISD make a video with chimps who we called PETA and said, give us a chimp wrangler that you think is okay. And Dave and Bernie were like pimps, I think. And there were drag
Wait, which
queens.
one was that?
This was for Bright Yellow Gun.
Oh, I remember seeing that.
You did? Because it's
on
like
120
blacklisted.
minutes.
It's like,
I know. Yeah, like when I was in high school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, it's really
The
hard
first
to find.
Throwing Muses song I heard was on and people keep laughing just because, like I was young then. I mean, I was like 10 in 91.
Uh-huh.
So it's like I really had to search to find stuff that I liked. But I remembered hearing Freeloader on a Doc Martin soundtrack when I got my Doc Martin boots.
We
when
got
I was
free
like 15.
Doc Martin boots because of that. I never knew why they gave us boots.
Yeah,
It's
man,
'cause they
and
used
the
Freeloader?
Breeders' Safari was on it, and Throwing Muses Freeloader was on it.
Who on earth
Yeah,
would put Freeloader
so thank you,
on
Doc
anything?
Martin. I don't know.
Wow.
But I loved it, though.
I just remember one day they pulled up to like Doc Martin and let us off the bus and said, you guys get free shoes. I never knew why.
You were on a Doc Martin compilation.
Ah.
If I can find it, which I possibly still have it, I'll give it to Dylan to give to you or something, because it's funny.
Well, Warner Brothers was letting us do anything we wanted, and they just couldn't believe that this alternative thing that we had brought to them was now big. But that video, they just couldn't handle with the drag queens and the drinking, and the chimp and I go to bed together, and we trash a hotel room, and it just got, they're smoking. They just hated the smoking, and so they gave us a whole nother budget to make a video, like another $100,000 or something for a video, and we're like, can we just keep it to eat? Why do we have to make another video? And they got the guy who made a Nirvana video to do the real Bright Yellow Gun video, and it was us in a room they built inside a soundstage in Los Angeles. And while we played, the camera was dropped down on a cable, and we would just push it around, so it was just shooting us kind of in the round. There was no one actually shooting. And while that happened, they filled the room with water. And it didn't occur to anyone that, electricity and water and drowning, and we couldn't get out of there till midnight, and the water levels like rising.
That's so weird.
That's what I mean. That's my point. Our lives were so weird.
Yeah.
It's like, just because they didn't want people to smoke.
Yeah. So we'll drown you or electrocute you.
Yeah.
But no smoking.
Right.
That's funny.
And then they decided that I was cute enough.
Oh, you got.
Cute enough to be made cute, which is really hard.
That's a plus, though.
Well, no, it worked against
something
me.
You can build from.
If I were like Janis Joplin or something, then I would have been left alone.
Yeah.
But this was like, she's not that bad. So they would bring stylists, and I did fashion shoots, and every video is just like, a work of art on my head, and it wasn't appropriate. I mean, it's really bad for one, but also I'm not cute, so it simply didn't work.
Well, I never heard the not cute thing, or I never knew that you were seen as not
cute.
So I'm like, that's new to me.
I didn't think there was too much wrong with me, but I knew that nobody liked me, and I was smart, and so those two things.
Yeah.
Smart means ugly.
I guess. Oh man. Okay. Let me think. Okay. How about your first solo record was 94, Hips and Makers. That's your first solo album. How do you like distinguish between if you'll release something as Throwing Muses or like, well, 50-Foot Wave is totally different because it's like loud.
It's still a stupid answer though. Do you
oh,
want it?
Yeah.
Okay. I write all my solo songs on my Collings acoustic guitars.
Okay.
I have to deal with Collings. And I write my 50-Foot Wave songs on my Les Paul or my SGs, and I write Throwing Muses songs on my Strat or my Telecaster. I know.
I had no idea. That's actually really interesting.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Dumb. My drummers say it's a flawed system.
Wow.
But I think it actually is a system. I think that when you are in the song, you reach for the right instrument. You know what the song wants, and then when you're done, you're you again. You're not in the atmosphere of the song any longer until you get to the studio, and then you're asked to sort of replicate the effect of being lost in that cloud.
Yeah.
So when I set foot in the studio on the first day of a recording session, I never know if it's going to be 2 weeks or 2 years, but I do know exactly what microphones I want to use. I know how I want to string all of the guitars. I know where I want the mics to be placed. I know what reverbs, if any, I want to use. I know how I want to break instruments in half and join them together into Frankenstein sounds. I know the basses I want to play and how to detune them and the effects I want. I know everything in my head, and I'm always completely wrong. Always off base, which has been the biggest lesson in my career. Like, I know what I'm doing, and I shouldn't. The song has to tell you what to do.
Okay.
Like, I can say I'm a really good mother, and I know that's true, but if I don't let my children do exactly what they want to do, be who they are, say what they have to say, then I'm not a good mother. I gotta serve the children, and I gotta serve the songs, and I gotta be invisible. I can't boss anybody around. I can wheedle and whine, and I can nudge, and then when a problem needs to be solved, I gotta jump in and do it. But I have to be attentive. That's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that about the guitars. There's a lot I didn't know. Okay, how about why? Well, I guess I know why, because Warner Brothers. But you started your own label. You started Throwing Music, and then were you also releasing your records on? I'm actually not sure what the difference is between Throwing Music and Cash Music. You started Cash Music because you kind of. This has been a common theme with all the women that I'm interviewing too. They really don't work with major labels anymore. It really is kind of DIY. They've started their own, distribution or recording companies, or so they kind of just do everything themselves. But I think that seems like it was a conscious decision on your part to do that and just kind of release your own stuff.
Which, I'm not Ani DeFranco just being my own record company. We hire people piecemeal rather than be part of a label. Love you.
Do you want to break for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Now I started it and I'm not saying anything. Well, I mean, because I didn't want to talk about, like, every single album that you've ever recorded, because there's just a lot. But I mean, is there any album that you've done that you would like to talk about that you're most proud of?
I have interesting takes on records. Like, I guess the one I'm most proud of is 50 Foot Waves, Power and Light. And by interesting take, I mean idiosyncratic take, like no one else's.
I'm glad you said 50 Foot Wave because that's probably, that band is like my favorite thing that you've ever done.
Oh, it's my favorite.
I'm a huge, I tell everyone when people are like, Kristen Hersh from Throwing Muses, I'm like, yeah, here, I'll burn you 50 Foot Wave.
Ew.
I love it. Yeah.
I love
Dylan
it.
knows I love it too. That's what, like, I went to see you with him. Like, can I go with you?
My God, that's so great. I
love
you.
that band.
It's an invisible band. Nobody knows about it. But that's sort of, like in LA where we started, we had a buzz and it was it was fun. Like we would play this bar every week and eventually the line was around the block. It was a nice story, you know, and it's just that we were a little self-conscious and a little stylized at first, and by the time we made Power and Light, which is a continuous piece of music, it's like half an hour or something, we were just like, woo, like no one's paying attention. Like, do whatever the hell we want. And now works way better for me. To think I work in a vacuum is my opportunity to do so.
Yeah.
And if anyone listens later, I'm just not attached. It's just, I had my vacuum moment and that was mine, and now it can be somebody else's soundtrack if it's good enough, and that's an honor. But to see that whole picture while you're working interferes with the process. So,
yeah.
I like Sky Motel, my solo record, a lot because it's very soothing, and this kind of sonic undercurrent is odd. Like they're like submarine sounds and wind. There's just always this kind of whirring. Like I was saying earlier, I was attracted to anything that's machine like the ocean and the wind whirring and all that. And, it has to be a little machine like, and that's what Sky Motel sounds like, because I was living on 40 acres of Joshua Tree land, and that's what it sounds like out there.
Yeah.
It just never stops. The wind goes through the trees, and there's a chorusy effect to the whistling of it, and Sky Motel sort of reflects that. And it's a very sweet record. I don't do a lot of sweet.
Yeah.
And Sky Motel is very colorful and gentle. Then I like Sunny Border Blue, which is another solo record for the opposite reason. It's just whiny as shit. It sounds like the Monkees if something really bad happened to them.
Yeah.
Which is okay. At least it sounds like the Monkees, you know.
If something really bad happened. I just got weirded out when you were talking about the wind sounds, because then I just heard, I think it was something in the kitchen, but I was in my headphones, it was like, whoosh, I thought I was going crazy. That's why if I was just staring at you blankly and like moved my, like, what's happening?
Well, that's what would happen before a song. I would hear that sound and I knew a song was coming, but sometimes my husband could feel a song before that happened.
Really?
Yeah, he would know from being like this far away from me that a song was starting, and I wouldn't even hear the initial, like, it's like static wind or something. I wouldn't be paying attention to it, and he would like lean over in bed and grab my arm and say, "Oh, it is a song."
Wow.
I know, and then that night I would start to hear the pre-song noise, and it was always at 4 a.m. that I would have to get up and write a song when it's not night.
Isn't that like the witching hour too?
Is
There's
it?
something about 4 a.m., yeah.
Is it?
Yeah, when people have experience of ghosts and things like that,
Really?
yeah.
Well, it isn't night
4
or
a.m.
day. It's very quiet. But it crosses time zones. So like, I fly to Australia or New Zealand, I'd be traveling for 36 hours, and if a song came, it was at 4 a.m. Australian time.
Oh. Yeah. I have read, and I don't remember where I read it, but that you wanted to quit music a lot.
Every
or
day.
that you don't. Still? I didn't know if that was but that you can't because of your, I don't know, your condition? I don't know.
Right.
Is that what it I don't know how you would refer to it.
Well, like I said, I tried to quit. I quit my band. I broke my band up, and it didn't work because songs are music, as it turns out.
Yeah.
And now, after EMDR therapy, I realize music isn't sound necessarily. It's just this pulsing will. And it resonates with me through sound, and so my expression of that resonance is how human beings make musical noise, you know. But it's not, I don't think music is originally that noise. It's like a transmutation of something. And this is my area of expertise for some reason, because that's where I see colors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have tried to quit, and in fact, anyone who's ever loved me has asked, if not begged me to quit. They all think it's going to kill me. And I think what they were talking about was the alter personality.
Okay.
And she did try to kill me once, at least once. So, because apparently they get mad at the host body for being the one in charge and putting them through all the traumas, which makes sense. But now I am all my traumas, and sorry, where I was going with that.
No, it's okay. I know. See, this is what I mean too. I should have been taking notes while you're talking, because then I lose it too. Yeah, man, I totally forget. I don't remember the question.
It was like giving up music.
Oh, giving up music.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I just did. If you know what I mean. It's still my area of expertise. But I don't see the pulsing will of the universe as noise anymore. And that's a shift that I haven't even seen the repercussions of yet. I adore a 50-foot wave, and it is a very noisy venture. And it will continue to be so, I imagine. But I am no longer in the maelstrom. I know some silence now. That would probably help.
You're very nice.
I am still nice. I'm not always nice, though. I tell the truth now.
Yeah.
That's the difference. I'm not going to be a jerk ever because I'm from Georgia. But I do tell the truth, which is interesting. I'm very clean now. Oddly, I had hangovers. That was a symptom that I had. Horrible, horrible hangovers from anything. Eating dinner would give me a hangover, an aspirin. And acupuncturists told me that it's because my liver function was shot. There were just too many toxic memories not being detoxified. Too many toxic feelings not being detoxified. It would be expressed in music, but not in life. And as soon as I was treated EMDR and my personalities were integrated, I had no more hangover. I was clean. I was just like, I can do anything, and it doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
Crazy, huh?
Yeah.
I never knew what the acupuncturist meant. I was like, right on, get a job, hippie. And they were right. Yeah, the liver is as the liver does.
Well, we'd like to talk a little bit about your writing, but before that, and I never want to sound, I feel like sometimes I say things and I sound tactless, but I'm like, so I preface it by saying, like, everyone I'm interviewing, like, I love you all, so I would never say anything rude, but just, and it makes me really mad when I see, like, do you ever feel resentful of the fact that you have never been able to, like, you make a living, but you have to constantly be working? I think we talked about it a little bit at dinner.
Right.
Like, have you ever, have you ever made enough money to be like, oh, I'm gonna relax for a year, like after this tour? That's what I mean. Like you're this respected kind of iconic artist with, I mean, your fans like really love you, and you have
all
this kind of like
them.
cult. No, I mean really, there are it's a small. I mean, it's a smaller group. You're not like this mainstream artist.
But that means people... that I have kept working, actually.
Yeah.
I wouldn't stop working. I can't, and I don't want to, but I would like a savings account. That would be great. You know,
yeah. And
just
I mean,
to know that my kids were safe, and I'm not going to have that. But there, bands with hits sell, 1 million records? I've sold 1 million records. It just took me 30 years. And it meant that I get to work in the corner in perpetuity. So I don't spend a lot of time being bitter about it. Mm-hmm. What I am angry about is music being treated like crap. Mm-hmm. I hate that people play lousy music to serve their egos and make money. Yeah. Because there are people who need good music, and our ears are full of goo. It's televangelism is what it is. It's fashion. Huh. It's awful. And to use music to do that is, I can get pretty resentful that people do that. But for me personally, I feel like I'm allowed to be a musician, and who could ask for more? Mm-hmm. I remember carrying my first baby, Dooney, down to the store, and he wanted raisins, and I couldn't afford them, and he cried. And I will never get over that.
No? Yeah. Did you say Dooney?
Yeah, that's what his name is in our family, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that, because then I heard your friend, what was it, Twinkle or Sprinkle or something?
Twinkle, yeah.
Twinkle.
Yeah.
All these names.
Yeah.
I'll have to text him that when I leave, too.
And Toby Snax is the other one.
Toby Snax?
Every baby is called Toby until there's another baby, and then that baby becomes Toby. So Toby just means the baby of the family. So the baby of the family is Toby forever. Yeah. Which happens to rhyme with Bodie. So I actually wrote a book for him because it's called Toby Snax, because he was... All the other kids, they just kind of stepped onto the bus willingly. They didn't really question our life. And Bo was born not wanting to leave home. Oh. He said, when are we going to get a forever house, which is this thing that I figured he invented. We're so not like that. Not only do we tour for a living, but we move every 6 months. Mm-hmm. And he said one day we were living in Palm Springs, and, there's honeysuckle and hummingbirds, and we don't have any money, but we had honeysuckle and hummingbirds. It was great. It's like that Hemingway lifestyle where you move around with the poor artists, and it's really nice. And if you'd think a kid wouldn't even blink, Mm-hmm. It's a hummingbird. Anyway, he said, when are we going to stop going places, get a forever house? And I said, thinking that I'm the smart mom, if we stop going places, then the adventure will end. And he said, yeah, when will the adventure end?
Oh, no.
And so I wrote a book about a little bunny rabbit who doesn't want to have adventures. Mm-hmm. And then his mother talks him into it. And she does it by listing all the things that he's actually done on tour, like feed a cracker to a prairie dog and go see sharks and swim with sharks and stuff. And it worked. And oddly, the book was sort of published, and all these parents have said, it's been so great, because she was afraid to go to nursery school, or he was afraid to go on vacation, or afraid to move. And so we read Toby Snax, and now he's not afraid. But he wants to swim with sharks. Well, which Bo always did want to do. He took him to the aquarium, on some tour. And you go to the top of the big tank and look down at the shark swimming. And we had always, all of us had loved looking down into the water at fish. And so we all lean over. And Bo, he's 3 years old, and he just sticks his leg over, like, tries to jump into the shark tank. We were like, no, that's not what it's for. It's like, you just look. And then we go into the butterfly room, and he starts screaming, like, get him off me, get him off me.
He tries to jump in a shark tank, but is afraid of
terrified of butterflies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Okay. Let me see. See, it's this non-linear. I think I am like a more boring thinker than I thought. Now that I'm sitting here talking to you, I'm like, I didn't realize how
Well, if you ask a question about... With the
I just get lost, like, easily.
Yeah, but it's not your fault. The question originates here on the timeline. It's not going to be answered until here.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, man. Okay. I do remember now, because you were talking about that was a book, and I was thinking to myself, this is kind of a good segue into writing. Ratgirl. But then I lost it, because then we ended up on sharks and butterflies, and I didn't bring a pen.
That's my fault. Me and tangents.
Okay, maybe I should know, but was Ratgirl your first, like, real book that you would publish?
I've been up since
No, I know.
It's like, because I'm writing a book.
And we're almost done, I promise.
You heard about that.
Yes, yeah. I heard about that again.
Set the alarm for 2 a.m. I was living in Portland, Oregon. We had another dramatic event where we were in London and a pipe burst in our house in Ohio, and 2 floors flooded and the ceiling collapsed, and our neighbors broke in and saved my guitars and family photos because they knew me. They were like, this is what she cares about, guitars and pictures of the babies. Mm-hmm. And they said the guitars were floating.
Oh, wow.
My telly has never been the same since. The input's all moldy. But we just lost everything. And it was a few weeks after Katrina, and so Allstate wouldn't cover the damages. So we lost our house, had to sell it at a loss, ended up like $250,000 in debt. Someone else had to take out a loan for us to sell the house, you know. And we're still paying them back, and our credit cards were all we had to live on. So Billy had started a company called Virtuous Ticketing to try and fight Ticketmaster, which someone had to do. So Billy did it, and oh boy, they practically had our legs broke. Yeah. They are scary. But he wanted all the ticket fees to go to charity, and so that's what Virtuous did. So our running away was to go to Portland, Oregon, where Virtuous was based, and he went to work for Virtuous for $1,500 a month, and we found a rental for $1,500 a month. So we were literally starving, and eventually our credit cards were maxed out, and there really was the beginning of the fall. The music business was not paying musicians, real ones, anymore. And people weren't going to shows, and people weren't buying CDs. And I started walking in the rain. And it was because I didn't know what else to do. I was maybe, I don't know, I was so thin, it was gross. I don't know how much I weighed. We couldn't afford a scale, but it was gross. And Billy was suicidal, and our children, I'm not sure they knew, I have to say. I'm proud to say. They did not sense tension. They just sort of, they were just watching their lives go by. I know there was a movie made at that time called Rock and Roll Mamas, so we always had a film crew around us, and you can see the kids are happy children. There's a little bit of a pall over the family, but not real bad when it came to the kids. I remember Billy unpacking a 6-pack of beer And our son Ryder, who was the oldest at home then, said, if we don't have any money, maybe we shouldn't spend money on extras like beer. And like said, are you implying that because we're poor we shouldn't drink beer? And that's when I decided I had to do something. Yeah. And I had a few journalists offer to ghostwrite my memoir for some reason. Oh. I don't know why, but I had always said like, oh sure, that sounds like a compliment, but I didn't know that it meant hours and hours and hours of talking about feelings. Yeah. Which I was not into. And in fact, one guy implied he was going to move in with me for a while. And I didn't really like this guy very much. So I stopped returning their calls a couple of years before this. And I had been reading my blogs and essays at the urging of some Portland friends at these writers' shows, these writers' events in Portland. And there's always something going on in Portland. Mm-hmm. And I didn't, they were actual authors on stage with me, and I was just reading blogs. I didn't think anything of it, and they kept saying, no, you're a writer, you got to do this. And I just thought they were nice, but I thought I would try. And the only book I had ever written was my teenage diary. And so really I actually didn't really mean to write that. My painter friends told me that painting was the only art form. The music was just bass. And I should be working toward painting. And I could do that by keeping a journal and, just getting quiet, and that would move toward images, Mm-hmm. It kind of makes sense, I guess, but it didn't work. And I didn't know how to write a diary, so I wrote it like a book, because I read books. I'd never read anyone's diary before. And so now I had to write a book, and I wrote it like the diary. And for 2 years it sucked. And then we moved to New Orleans. Billy got a job teaching at a university there, and for the next 2 years the book just wrote itself. Mm-hmm. And I watched, and I would set my alarm for like midnight and write until 7 or 8 whenever the kids got up, and just get lost in time, just trying to remember how my old car smelled or how dead people's voices sounded. And it was great. And the dogs were really freaked out. They were suspicious. They were just sort of, dogs just look at you real worried. Yeah. They would just kind of look at me real worried. And it was New Orleans, but it was winter and it was cold, and I was burning our Christmas tree to stay warm. So I wouldn't let Billy get rid of the Christmas tree, like even in February.
Can use that for kindling.
Exactly. And eventually, Penguin, my publisher, said, "Pencils down, Chris." And so it's like, oh, all right, it's good enough, I guess. It could be better, but. And I gave it to them and kind of went on tour. Mm-hmm. And when I came off tour, like I said, we move a lot. Yeah. We were in Providence, Rhode Island, and I came home, and on my porch was a stack of Ratgirls, a box full of Ratgirls. And I thought, oh, crap. What have I done? Because it's true. And it's all true, and people are alive and could read it. Yeah. And I was nice, because I'm nice. But I'm not mean to anybody in it, but they're going to read it. And I had this moment of like wanting to just shove them under the porch as if that would work. But what I did instead was, before it was published, I gave all the copies to the people who were in it, who were still alive. And I really didn't know what they were going to say. Like, I was a little worried they were going to say, like, what planet were you on? Yeah. Because it was a long time ago. It was 20, 25 years before. Mm-hmm. And they all said, yep, it's exactly what it was like.
Oh, they agreed?
Yep. They said, it's just like hanging out with you at 17.
Yeah.
And yep, all that stuff happened. And every now and then I'd be like, did Deep Purple really kick us out of the studio? Like, yep, that happened. And they all loved it. They were just so sweet. They sort of felt bad for me, I think. Like, it was really touching. I remembered the way they used to take care of me that I hadn't been aware of at the time. Because they just, like I said, they literally surrounded me. And my sister would do all my talking, and Dave would tell me who people were if I didn't know. I'm just like, what do you call that? It's like I'm just not like other people. And I think reading the book sort of reminded them of that. Because I've matured and I learned to act like other people, and I don't live with my bandmates around me. And so...
You just said learn to act like other people.
Yeah.
Which is an act. I mean, do you feel any, and especially musicians or people that I've talked to so far, and even me, I mean, I'm not like a famous person, but I just feel different now that I'm older. Yeah, I feel like I care less. Do you feel any different than you did then? Or do you just present, like you said, just learn to act like everybody else, like present?
Right. I learned that I like people a lot
Me
more.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was very angry.
Yeah, and I was very, very shy.
Yeah.
I would just rather do without people. And now I'm one of those people that makes eye contact and smiles, and I talk to cashiers, and I have found that it's really good medicine both ways. And it's unusual for someone to not respond, to just light up because you suddenly care.
Yeah.
And I really do care about strangers. It might be New Orleans that's done that to me, because it's like a big family there, and you walk into a drugstore and there's no cashier and customer. You walk into a doctor's office and there's no doctor and patient. It's just people, and they act like we're a family, and which is right. It's true, and it's what you should be doing. So, I think they made me brave.
Made you brave?
Yeah.
And your New Orleans family?
I've been there for a while now. We made records there over the years, like University and Sky Motel, and from way back.
I didn't know you'd been there that long. Because when I had asked Dylan, like, you asked your mom if she'll do this interview? He said you were in New Zealand. And I'm like, they live in New Zealand?
You ain't in New Zealand, New Orleans.
Yeah.
We've only lived there for 6 or 7 years, but we've been making records there for a long time. And it's another country.
Yeah.
It's not just another state.
Yeah, I haven't been yet.
But I don't think I changed fundamentally, because I had to work Ratgirl for a long time, and so many writers, journalists and reviewers say, like, you really captured the voice of a teenage girl when we're sitting down, and then at the end of the interview they're like, you didn't capture anything, you just didn't change, did you?
Yeah.
It's like, no. That's my secret.
Funny. Well, and you were a teenager when you wrote it, right? They were journals?
Yeah, they were. The book that Penguin signed was really esoteric.
Yeah.
It was nothing like the nonfiction novel that I published.
Oh, okay. So you
it's
really
just the
had
story that was in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when the editor returned the manuscript, I had to go on tour, and it was actually printed on paper with red marks in the margins, like a teacher would do, but she was like 22 or something, and she had no concept of what the 80s were like.
Yeah.
So some of her comments were like, why couldn't people find you just because you were living in your car? I was like, because it wasn't the Batmobile, which was the only car with a phone in it. Or like, one of them was, what is everyone else doing when you're not around?
Oh my, that was a comment.
Like, I don't know. What's everyone else doing when you're not around? Talking about me. Well, they're all aliens, so I just kept saying, it's nonfiction.
Yeah.
And she'd say, you know what would be better? I was like, yeah, anything would have been better than that whole year. Yeah. But it's nonfiction. We can't change the past. One of them was, step back and from your 40-year-old perspective, tell us how you feel about this. I was like, in my time machine, it's a diary. Like, you can't go back in time. Believe me, I've tried. But this was all in the, on tour that I was yelling at the manuscript and not the person.
Yeah. Because you're nice.
Because I'm nice. And the people I was touring with said, Chris, you're swearing an awful lot. Could you maybe do that when you get home? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I'm cool with it. And I felt so self-righteous, like I didn't deserve that, It was hard enough to write a book and then have comments like, what would be better than what happened? Change your name. And then we were in England and we drove through Thirsk, which is James Herriot's town of Derby. Derby is a fictional name. And we stood on his front porch and peeked in his windows, and I was humbled because that man never confused anybody. He wrote heartwarming, funny, good, morally sound, fucking hilarious stories for anyone, and no one was confused. And I thought, I confused this poor girl,
Yeah.
Nobody's allowed to do that. If you're right, if the printed word is your new medium, then use it to communicate. Mm-hmm. And so every time she got confused, I wouldn't necessarily take her advice, but I would think, oh, note to self, some people might get confused here. Like, one of the problems was that the first third of the book took place at a show, and she had heard that bands toured from city to city. So every time she turned the page, she thought we were in a different city. So on every page for a third of the book, it said, what city are you in now? I was like, have you read a book before? When you turn the page, you're still in the same scene. But she was confused. So I brought the book home, and at the end of the tour, I put it on my desk and thought, I need a beer to face this, because I'm gonna start swearing at the red pencil again. And I mean, how long does it take to get a beer? Maybe 30 seconds. In that time, my dog, who'd never done anything like this, destroyed the entire manuscript. It was just dog spit and red pencil marks. And really, I think the girl was just trying to keep her job, just like making stuff up. My job is to write with a red pencil, so I'm going to say stuff. And so I just pet the dog on the head. It's a good girl. And I wrote a book that wouldn't really confuse anybody.
Yeah.
But I didn't take her advice to do so. And then later I was talking to Colin McCann at a literary event in Aspen, and he wins like the National Book Award. And I said, what do you do, about their suggestions? Because I don't think I took any of them. And I feel like a jerk. And he's like, no, that's what you do. You don't take any of them, and then you say that you did. It's like, that's what I did. She thought we made a great book together. And he's like, yeah, they don't remember what they said. I was like, oh, phew. So I still got to be nice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just started doing that with all my papers now.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Going back, it was just like torn apart, and I'm like, I'm just going to pretend that I'm going to change everything that they suggested I change, and then I just turn it in the way I want it.
And does it work?
Yeah, it works.
It worked for me, yeah.
So, I know.
No, that's good.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I really want. Is there anything that that you feel like you? I mean, in closing, do you feel like you want to say or talk about, or that's been important to you, or something important that you've learned? Not to be cheesy, but
no. For the past decade or so, people have been very concerned with the idea that there isn't a recording industry anymore to support musicians.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've certainly suffered for that, and we've lost some good soldiers like Vic Chestnut, Mark Linkus, and it's definitely a war, but it was a war before, and it was much uglier when the 1% was winning and they were keeping good music out of people's ears. At least we have opened up the ether so that music is available to people, and in order to afford them a musical education, they have to be musically literate or they won't know who's lying and who's telling the truth. They won't know that music can move your spine and save your life. Now they can wade through genre and era to get to music that moves them. They can stop being the victim of fashion. And I think ultimately that will serve the good musicians if it hasn't already. I feel like it's already served me. Now, I am listener supported probably because I participated in the old recording industry. But the passion that makes someone share actual money, makes someone buy 10 CDs that they already have saying Christmas is coming in May. That kind of what appears to me to be altruism is more like a circle of gratitude that comes from nobody wanting music to suck. Only those executives wanted it to suck. And the young musicians that come to these seminars and ask how they can get more people to look at them don't yet know that first, they can't suck. It's really, really important, because if no one ever pays attention to what you do, at least you didn't suck. Like, you should be playing for heaven and happy to do so.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it does seem to start this stirring, this cycle of energy that that can bring it to the people who need it. And if nobody needs it, then at least you did. It's good, healthy, spontaneous energy that will eclipse you if you're lucky. And if you think you're more important than music, then you're never going to be a musician. So the best thing you can do is to have that carrot taken away. Like, you will not be famous. You will not make money. Now go.
Yeah.
Play.
Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
fitting this into your schedule.
No, it was
a
enjoyable.
pleasure.
You're so lovely and smart.
Oh, thanks.
Like,
I didn't press stop on the recording yet. Okay, thanks
say
a
I'm
lot.
the best.
Kristen Hersh is the best and my most favorite interview, and I will never let Lydia Lunch see this tape.
Yes. She'll beat both of us up. We're both scared of her.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah.